Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you for the compliment, Seth. The sentiment's mutual. So, no, thank you so much, Adorama, for having me here. Thank you, Flashpoint, for having me here. Thank you, Printique, for having me here. I'm being told to step forward. I know, whenever there's live stuff like this, I always find myself in exactly the wrong space. We're just going to work through this. We just wanted to do something for you today where I was deconstructing my process, and I think for a lot of these things, I was just talking with the live audience here, you know, you see a setup like this, and then you feel like you walk into it and everything's already done. I want to deconstruct all of this down to baser thought process. So I want you to know why I'm doing the things that I'm doing, not just how I'm doing the things that I'm doing, and I want this to be interactive. So I could sit here and talk to you for an hour straight. He can vouch for this. I could probably do that for about 10 hours straight because I like to talk and I'm good at it. But I want this to be a dialogue between us. So if you have any questions, you're here in the audience, ask. Have any questions out there on the stream, please ask. There are no bad questions, right? And more than likely, if you have a question, there's 5 other people who are wondering the exact same thing. So just ask it and give me a chance to address that and be of service to you. We have Gerald here with us, who I'm so excited to photograph. I had an opportunity to pick who I wanted to photograph. Come on, people, clap for Gerald, everyone. Darn it. I had an opportunity to select who I wanted to photograph, and it was a couple of things. Obviously, he has a wonderful aesthetic, but in his photos, he just had an energy about him. And I talk about that a lot with my portrait subjects. I really just like to photograph unique human beings. And I think we're all wonderfully unique in our own ways, but there was, for some reason, I just felt drawn to him, and we've been talking. He was in the fashion industry. I was in the fashion industry. He heard that I'm from Denver, and he's like, no way. Whereabouts? And I'm like, oh, well, here. And I'm like, where are you from? He said, Wheat Ridge. It's literally like 5 minutes away from where my studio's at. So he's now here in Denver. He's been in Paris. I'm all over the place. And we have like half a degree of separation. So that actually goes back to the thing that I want to start with, or I guess circles into the thing that I wanted to start with, and that is connection. And that's what my process is really all about. So we have lights, we have backdrops, we have lenses, we have gear, we have all of the fancy stuff, the stuff we nerd out on, the really fun stuff. But really, this is an art form that's about human beings. It's about people. And so if we lose sight of that, nothing else matters. You can have a photograph that's technically sound, you can have a photograph that's really beautiful, but if it doesn't have depth, if you're not taking the time to connect with the human being in front of you, then ultimately it's going to be hollow. So more than anything else, I want to encourage you to return to that. Stay connected to yourself and stay connected to the people in front of you. And that's when you're going to create images that are really impactful. And especially for those of you who are doing this for work, remember, when your client is looking at a photo after the fact, they're not seeing the photo, they're seeing the experience. So if Gerald retained me to photograph him in this way, he's not going to be reviewing the images after going like, oh, I really like how he used Rembrandt light and his 2:1 ratio is fantastic. And the fact that he used an 85 1.4 Sony GM made me look stellar. He's not going to be thinking any of those things. He's going to say, oh, we laughed together, we cried together, we told stories, we were there. He's going to feel what he felt. It is an archive of the moments that you share with the people in front of you. And that's what's most important. Now, with that being said, obviously, we're going to get into lighting because light and shadow is how we speak language. It's how we tell other people's stories. But I think it's really important to just set an energetic precedent of staying in that space of mind and not losing sight of the person. I know for me, when I first got into this, I was hyper fixated on wanting to look like a professional, right? So people walked into my studio and I'm like, I have big lights and I have big lenses and I have big things and they're shiny and this and that, you know? And it was then I would walk around with my lats flared and I'm like, yeah, I'm a big deal. And it's because I was masquerading because I didn't feel comfortable in my art form, right? I wanted people to perceive me in a way that I myself didn't perceive. Seth, mute. Sorry. No, I'm just joking. That's just ripping me over here. But like, I wanted people to perceive me in a way that I did not perceive myself. And so I built that up. But what I didn't realize is as I was building that up, I was building distance between me and the person in front because I wasn't staying present. And if I'm not present, there's no space for Gerald to be present. If I'm not authentic, there's not space for Gerald to be authentic. So the people in front of our camera mirror our energy. They mirror our space, they mirror our place, they mirror our mindset. So it all comes back to that. And with that being said, I'm going to get into this because I could just do my TED Talk for the entire hour and someone out there is going to be like, Jonny, I wanted to learn about lighting. Let's get into lighting. So the first thing that I'll talk about is the set, and I did not know what Gerald was going to wear, all right? So this is a happy coincidence that he came in with the blues and the blacks. We have the black on the table. We have these kind of greens and yellows behind him. But what Seth and I came to was we wanted to have layers for a set because that's how I tend to shoot. So in my studio, I work with a lot of canvas. I work with a lot of layered sets, and what I really want is depth and dimension. Because with photography, of course, we're working with a two-dimensional medium, and I want to create the illusion of a third dimension. So I do that through light, I do that through shadow, and I do that through texture. In this case, we have two of these. Are these 5x7s, or are these 7x7s or 5x7s?
I think they're 5x7.
No, I don't think so either. I think they're 7x7s. But we have these really cool modular 7x7 background systems from Manfrotto. And so we pulled 2 of these out, and initially I was just thinking of doing this in black and white, but this little bit of space here allows us to light this background separately, Gerald separately, and create a sense of depth in this. So depending on what our settings are here, we're gonna see this front portion, we're gonna see this portion right behind Gerald, and then we're gonna see a back portion. And that's going to lend itself to depth in our scene. I never want something to feel flat. One of the greatest compliments on the technical side to me is when someone's like, Johnny, it feels like I can reach out and touch the people in your photos. And I'm like, don't do that without consent, right? Ask first. But ultimately, bad jokes aside, like I want there to be a sense of depth. And then we start to lean into that with shadow. The other thing that's really compelling to me are just the textural elements. If you know my work, you know I leave light stands in, you know I leave background stands in, and there's sort of an industrial feel to that. And it makes even more sense to me when Gerald came in and we talked about his background as a hairstylist, as a multimedia artist. He spent 3 decades on sets for fashion. And so he has been in these environments. So it was kind of an unintentional consequence. But now when I'm looking at this and seeing Gerald on a set, I'm seeing even more about him, because this is part of his story. Being on sets like this, on stages like this, is part of who he was for a very long time and part of who he is now, even though he shifted into painting more, which we were talking about. That's one other thing that I want to say here is it's really kind of curious, because ultimately I want to show you what my process is. But I'm kind of constricted, because if we were here alone and you weren't here like we were earlier, I would just be sitting here talking. We're like, oh, this and oh, that. But obviously I'm having to educate at the same time. And I love that. And I appreciate you all being here. But there's an element of what I do that you can't see, because the fact that all of you are watching and I'm teaching to you while you're watching precludes me being able to do that in real time. But I just want you to know that generally speaking, like I'm talking a lot more with the people who are in front of my camera. I think that's one thing that we don't do enough of as photographers, is just spend time connecting and communicating. And I'm working with, normally if Gerald came in, I would be setting up these lights around him just as another back note. So I have a general idea of what I'm going to do, but I don't have my lights set and metered before someone comes in. And the reason being is when Gerald walks into my studio, I lift this light up and I start adjusting for it, and I look, and then I light this light up. And by the time I actually get to taking the first real photo, I know about the man, I know about the person, I know about the human being, and he knows about me. So now there's a reciprocal energy that's at place where he's feeling comfortable, I'm feeling comfortable, and we can focus on making some really incredible art. So that's sort of just the precedent of what's going on there. On the technical side, we're using Flashpoint gear today. Once again, thank you, Flashpoint. I'm gonna get into these lights one at a time so I don't overwhelm you with technical information. And then camera-wise, I'm using a Sony a7R IV. Lens-wise right now, I'm using a 35 1.2 from Viltrox. The lenses are really great from Viltrox. If you haven't used them, I definitely recommend checking them out. They punch way above their price. Categorically speaking, I use the 35 a lot. So if you know my work at all, 90% of my work is shot with the 35. We were talking about this a little bit earlier, and what I really love about the 35 is it very closely approximates the way the human eye sees. So if I'm this close, pardon me invading your space for a second, Gerald, but if I'm this close to Gerald, right, his face is going to distort a little. So people talk about distortion with the 35, but if he's in my frame of vision, his face is going to distort, and that's what the 35 does. So to me, the 35, the distortion from it is very natural, because if someone's face is filling the frame, it feels like you're present with them in that space. So there's a certain level of like visceral intimacy about this focal length that I find very compelling. I still use 85s now and again too, but the way that the 85 creates compression in the face, that's not how a person looks when you're that close to them. And there's even that division, which I'm sure some of you have had before, where someone sees a photo taken with an 85 or a 135 and they're like, that's not me, right? Because they're not familiar with their face. The psychological ramifications of that are twofold, because most of us now know our faces based on our phones, okay? So most of us know this. We have a phone in front of us, and guess what? That is a wide-angle lens on that phone. You are not looking at yourself with a 50 or an 85, you're looking at yourself with a 16, an 18, a 24. So your nose is getting a little bit bigger, your face is slimming, and then we're on our phones, and then we do this, we go, huh, and then we do this, and then we do that, and then we do this, and we find our lines, and then someone sees their face with more natural lighting with an 85, and they're like, that's not me. That's not what my face looks like, and that's beyond the scope of what we're gonna get into right now. But I will just say, if you haven't tried working with something like a 35 for portraits, I suggest giving it a go. And they're all tools. So before we really get into this, the other thing that I wanna say is there is no right or wrong. We're artists. You know, we're not technicians. There's no right lighting, there's no wrong lighting, there's no right lens, there's no wrong lens. I know people who use 200mm lenses and get great results. I know people who use 16mm lens and get great results. It's about what your vision is, what you are trying to say and convey, and the story you're trying to tell about the person in front of your camera. And there's enough dogma on that stuff, so just leave that by the wayside. Just play and experiment and see what feels right. And as you see me go through this, that's what I'm very driven by. There's an intuitive point at some point here that I'm gonna go, that just looks right to me. It feels right to me. And I'm gonna do my best to deconstruct that, but it's not because of a ratio. It's not because of a lighting pattern. It's not because it's Loop or Rembrandt or whatever Seth was making fun of me for earlier that I can't even recall. It's simply because it feels right relative to the person in front of me. So you have to learn to trust yourself. And once you start to trust yourself, that's where your vision and voice as an artist starts to emerge. As you build on that, that's when you have people like Gerald coming to you going, hey, Seth, I want you to photograph me because I love what you do and only you do what you do. And that really comes down to just standing in your own shoes confidently. But obviously that's a stepwise process. So with that being said, we're gonna start building out our light, and we have a Flashpoint 600 SE. I use these extensively. Generally speaking, when I'm in my studio, I have at least 600 watts on my strobe heads. And if you have a 200, it's okay, everyone. So if you're out there and you're like, I only have 200, that's a 200 too. So we're gonna get into that as well. But I just like to have more power than I need, especially because I shoot on location a lot as well. So if I'm outdoors and I'm battling the sun, I'd rather have that 600 watts to work with than be struggling trying to stack two 200s together. But that's a use case scenario. But we're starting with that 600 for our key, and that has the 36-inch Parasnap on it with a grid. So the cool thing about the Parasnaps, if you haven't seen them, I'm not gonna break this down right now, is they literally snap together and they fold flat. So if you're actually bringing something on location, or let's say your studio is like my first studio and you have like 100 square feet, instead of having this giant modifier rolled up in the corner, they fold flat almost like paper and you can stack them. And also, yeah, Seth is like, just show the people what they want to see. All right, so, okay, where? Wait, right where?
Your matcha can go under here.
Oh, I thought you said there's a couple more right here, and that made no sense to me.
I just don't want to see a cup of matcha hit the floor. So
that's part of my process.
Yeah.
My process is ruined now, Seth. I have to spill matcha every shoot.
Artists will tell you anything.
Oh, we're rowing again. I'm telling you. See, now Seth, I'm going to bring one of these down, and I'm going to just look like an ass. Anyway, okay, so literally, if you're opening one of these up, it's down, it's folded flat. This is kind of a paid advertisement. No, not really. But they're just really cool. So, I mean, especially if you're having to build stuff down and break it up, they're really, really easy. You want to undo this, it's down. So they're great in terms of space saving and just ease of access. We have the grid on here, and that's important because we're controlling our light and we're controlling our shadow. So if you haven't worked with grids before, one of the big things is if this wasn't on here right now, the light would be coming out in all directions. So it would be coming off the lip of our modifier and it would be hitting back here. It would be hitting over here. It would be coming lower on here. It would be going to the ceiling. I want to control where the light is hitting in my environment. I want to define the light, but more importantly, I want to define the shadow. I want to be able to decide where the edge of shadow is on my backdrop. I want to be able to decide where the edge of shadow is on my subject. So we're really shaping light when we start to integrate things like grids onto modifiers. So I'm almost always using a grid on my key. And then what we're going to do from there after we structure our shadows is we're going to start to fill those shadows. We're going to start to modulate, and then we're going to build layers of light into the scene from there. So I don't know what I had this at before. I'm just going to take a test shot. I will say I don't meter things, and I have really bad ADHD, if you can't tell. And so really what that turns out to be is I have to get started. If I try and plan the perfect setup in my mind, I will never do anything. It's literally paralysis by analysis. So if I happen to have a light up like this and Gerald walks into the studio, I might start here, and then I'm going to go, oh, it's too hard, it's too soft, it's too close, it's too far away. What'd you do, buddy? It's one of those things, and then I just make a decision from there. And my camera went to sleep, of course. Also, come on, friend. Seth, what did you do to my computer? And my battery is exhausted. So we were just talking about me being a pro. Even pros run out of batteries sometimes.
Yeah,
come on, Seth.
Some of us talk so much that our batteries run out. That's what happens.
Seth's social battery ran out about 2 hours ago, so it only figures that my camera follows suit. So I will
That's the only thing that goes wrong. You're fine.
I will say a really big thing too that I think is one of the best skills that we can have as I'm opening this up as photographers is just to be able to roll with the punches, right? Things are going to happen on set, and like Gerald's attitude as my client, as my subject is going to depend on me. So if all of a sudden one of my strobes doesn't fire and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, or just it's one of those days, then all of a sudden he's going to start taking that on, right? So like we'll work around it no matter what happens. If I have to use Seth's camera, I'm going to make it work. So just maintain that level of confidence, and even if you're not feeling it, fake it till you make it. Because ultimately, whoever is there in the room with you is going to be picking up on that energy for better and for worse. And Seth, you'll be happy to know I have 4 backup batteries in my bag.
Oh,
Thank you.
He gets a clap for that? What? Oh, man. Oh.
See, when you set the precedent low for yourself, Seth, like, you can just jump up on it.
never.
That's gonna quit the industry after this live. Like,
This is quitting during this live. I am out, man. You guys have any questions while he's, being unprepared?
valid point. No, seriously, does anyone have any questions in the chat, or do any of you have any questions or comments or anything right now? No? Good. Well, and I think for me, one of the big things is just to see, like, in my mind, I always assumed that the people I looked up to as photographers, like, it was like Fantasia, right? They walked in and they snapped their fingers and the lights moved around, they took 2 frames and like, I'm done. And they walked out. It's like, as long as we've been doing this, Seth and I worked into this process today. We worked into the lights, we worked into the backgrounds, we worked into all of this, we modified, we shifted, we shaped. It is a stepwise process. All right, let there be camera battery.
I think at some point you should do a walkthrough of what you have set up, though, so that it's clear online.
Yeah, absolutely. Like in its entirety before I start breaking down the lights?
You're doing, yeah.
Okay.
While he's doing that, if you guys are in the chat, there's 105 of you and only 28 likes. He feeds himself on likes.
I will stop talking unless I get 10 more likes.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely. I will. This is nonviolent resistance. Give me more likes. Give Adorama, give Seth more likes too. Seth needs it. Seth's having a rough day, everyone. Like, if he doesn't get more likes, like, seriously, like, I'm gonna have to take him to therapy after this. So.
Get shooting.
Okay. Anyway, I told you I talk a lot.
What did I pay you for? Let's go.
So to those who are out there right now, like I mentioned, when we first got onto the live, we have these 2 backdrops that we have layered for depth. Here we have that 600 with a 36-inch octa with a grid. That's gonna be our key. For our fill light, we're using a can on this. So it's another 600 watt pro, and we're bouncing this into the ceiling and corner. So we're gonna use this for environmental fill. We're gonna see what that looks like in a second. And then we're using this as a background light. So it's a 200 watt AD, and we have that with a 24-inch Perisnap beauty dish with a grid. So we'll actually start building this out one by one so you can see what's going on. So let's just take our first shot here, and we're just gonna see what it looks like and then kind of build out. Now, Gerald is really good at this, right? He's so comfortable being on set, so you're not gonna see me having to work him into being easeful. As we're talking, he's just like, GQ, Zapper, fabulous, fantastic, right? So like, I don't even have to really give him any cues on this, but earlier he had dropped into this pose and he was talking about being in Paris and things, and I was like, I love that. So we're starting with that as a central pose. I'm just gonna start with wherever this light is, like I said, and we're just gonna take a peek at what this is like, and then we're gonna go from there. So that is the beginning of our light. So what I'm looking at here is, what does the structure of light look like on Gerald's face? How are our shadows looking? How is our light looking? What's going on with all of this? And this to me is a really good base to start. So we're almost completely direct with this modifier. We're not feathered off. We have direct light. We have controlled light. I'm keeping the light soft, even though it's contrasty, because that modifier is close to Gerald. Remember, the bigger the size of the modifier relative to your subject, the softer the light. So if we take something big and get it close, the light's going to be soft, but it's also going to have rapid fall off, and it's going to be contrasty. So if you look at my work and you see kind of, they'll call it painterly. We had a row about this earlier. But if you see that, it really starts with large, soft, contrasty light, or harder light sources that we then modulate. But this is looking good to start. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add in our second light. So I'm looking at the shadows on camera left, the right side of Gerald's face in this photo, and I want to start to lift those, because to me those transitions right now are pretty abrupt. It's falling into dense shadow, and we're sort of moving directly from highlights here or midtones into shadows, and it's a rough transition. So one thing that I like to see in skin for my photos is smooth tonal transitions. So when we move to highlights to midtones to shadows, there's density in each one of those, but there's a smooth roll off throughout, and we're gonna do that by adding in this fill. Now, of course, when we do that, we're not just filling Gerald, we're filling the entire scene. So we're gonna bring more detail into the texture of these backdrops. We're gonna start to see more of the depth of those backdrops, and we're gonna lift the shadows and the exposure in our entire scene. So we're gonna go ahead and bring that in next. Am I moving at a good pace for you now, Seth? You happy?
It's your. I'm not. What is this? I'm
putting you on the spot.
I'm quiet, man.
I'm teasing.
Look at this guy. I don't know. I'm feeling vulnerable and abused now. I don't know. I don't know. Why am I being bullied?
This is going to be the hashtag cancel Johnny. He bullied Seth. All right. So I currently have this set to 1/8 power. Just for those of you out there who are, driven by that, this is at 132. So our key is at 132 power. Our fill light is currently set at 1/8 power. I am at f6.3, 35 millimeters, of course, for the focal length, 1/200th of a second, and ISO 200. So I'm just going to take another test shot here, and now I brought that fill light into the scene, and we're going to see what this looks like. So that made a massive difference. Let's zoom this out for a second and just toggle that. So as we bounce that into the back, look at how that dramatically changed everything. So we've lifted the overall exposure of our scene. We've modulated the shadows on Gerald. And we've kept that lighting pattern, right? That lighting and the structure in his face, the dimensionality, the depth is still there, but now we have smoother tonal transitions through the skin. So especially as we start to look into that shadow side, this just beautifully bleeds off from highlights to midtones to shadows. Now that I'm opening this up and thinking about Gerald more and knowing him more, I'm actually gonna bring that fill light down a little bit because I think we've lost some of the mystery there. It's a little bit too bright in the shadows for me. So I'm gonna bring that down probably half a stop and take a peek, but he was talking about Paris, he was talking about fashion. I'm like, this guy's been there, done that. So we need to add some shadows into his story a little bit more, right? So I'm just gonna bring that down a smidge, then we're gonna take one more test shot. And this is what I do in terms of process. I create an anchor. So for the anchor, we had colors, we had layers on the set. For the anchor with our light, we had our key. We get that anchor in place. We don't adjust anything else. And then we start bringing in these other elements piecewise, one at a time.
There's a question in the chat.
Please.
So Heidi's asking, do you just go with the glasses, then fix when there are reflections?
No, so if there's, I do everything I can to avoid reflections, right? So one of the big things right away is that we're not using direct light. So it's almost like when you play pool, right? The way you keep reflections out of glasses is you alter your subject's face relative to the light or the light relative to your subject's face. So at some point I might see when Gerald turns his nose this way toward the light that there's a reflection. Rather than dealing with that in post, I would rather just say, hey, Gerald, bring your chin down and over an inch. Right, so I'm constantly trying to fix that. Seth and I talked about this earlier. I try and get it right in camera. Not because I'm a purist, but because that makes me feel like an artist. One thing I've always struggled with my life and as a photographer is feeling like a genuine creative and artist. And if I can look at the back of my camera and say, I've taken the time to get it right, that makes me feel fulfilled. If you're doing things like taking care of glasses in post, using AI, doing compositing, whatever that might be, that's great, right? It's all process. But for me to feel my best, I would rather focus on getting it right here and keeping as little work as possible on the back end for me because I've spent my days, 60-hour weeks working in front of a computer in a corporate environment, and that's not why I picked up a camera. So I'd rather stay here, be traveling or doing something else instead of sitting at my workstation wondering what the point of it all is. But that's an existential jaded thing that we won't get into right now. So I've turned that down to from 1/8 to we're gonna go to 1/16 here in terms of our power. Da-da-da, da-da. And that's perfect, just like that, Joe. And a deep breath in. And normally I do the breathing thing to get people relaxed, but it looks like he was born to be in front of the camera. So this makes my job very easy. And there's always this feedback, right? So that's another thing that I'm doing with the people in front of my camera. I'm always giving them reinforcement. Another thing that can happen is we get really quiet. And here's this, right? Let's say Gerald has never been in front of the camera before. And now I'm sitting here and I haven't used strobes before. It's my first time using 2 strobes and I'm nervous. So I'm shaking in my boots and I'm looking at it and I don't understand why my strobe's not flashing and I'm making this face. I'm going, ugh, ugh. And I'm looking at him and he's like, what is going on with my face? Do I look like a monster? Right, simply communicating and saying that out loud. Hey, this is a new light. I'm trying to figure it out. Thank you for being patient with me. It diminishes that right away. So just make sure that you're constantly staying in communication with the person in front of your camera so they're not wondering and creating a narrative of their own in their mind. So this to me is looking lovely now, right? It's structured, it's dimensional, it's kind of regal. Overall, as a base level exposure, this is looking really, really solid. The one thing that I am noticing is that this metal frame is throwing me for a bit of a loop here, right? The way that we read images is we see the brightest part of the image, the part with most contrast, and the part with the greatest degree of separation. So given the fact that this is just pure metal, bare metal, my eyes are going to the frame. So Seth and I talked about this earlier. He's gonna be kind enough to throw some gaff tape on there. Obviously, because of this setup, I might be floating a backdrop normally using something like a Mathellini clamp over the top. We didn't have that available to us, so when in doubt, gaff it up. Right, we're just gonna throw some gaff tape on it. That's gonna completely change the tone here, and now it's gonna appear as though it's floating, and it's... Okay, perfect. But this alone is gonna make a huge difference. So I'm gonna take that same frame one more time, Gerald. Perfect. And I'm getting a little bit closer here just to make sure I'm not getting those overhead bars as well. That's huge. Huge, huge difference, right? And that's one of those details that you wouldn't notice, or some people wouldn't notice at first, but that's going to draw focus away. If we are not deciding where people start in our image and where they end, it's being decided for us. So anytime I'm looking at a scene, I'm going, what is pulling my focus away from my subject? Another thing that we did is I had Teresa, who's in the back right now. Hi, Teresa. She's wonderful. And I had her bring us a tablecloth. And the reason being is we wanted to have this stage, but the way that this texture and color is, this would have drawn all the attention to the top, right? It's brighter, it's highly reflective, it looks acrylic. Everything else out here is highly textured and organic. So we bring in something that's inorganic and that's brighter than anything else in the scene. Instead of keeping our eyes on Gerald, it's gonna go here. We didn't have another canvas to throw over the top. This isn't an expensive muslin. This is literally just a piece of random fabric that we throw down the top to make sure that we're keeping cohesion in our scene. So it's little details like that that make a huge difference. This is all looking really, really good to me now. The one thing that I wanna do is show off this depth a little bit more, right? That was my funny bone, and it wasn't funny at all. So I want to show off this depth a little bit more. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use this beauty dish, that 24-inch that has the grid on it, and we're going to start throwing some light down. Now the position I have this in, it's going to throw some light to the backdrop here, but we're also allowing some of that light to skirt in to get a little bit of highlight here as well. And then we're going to start to see a greater division between those two pieces. And this is another thing, I think I have it at 132 power right now. There's no direct significance of that. I'm just going to turn it on, and if it's too bright, I lower it. If it's too bright, or if it's too dark, I raise it, right? So it's just a stepwise process for everything. So we're gonna turn that light on. You're doing amazing, by the way, Gerald.
Oh, thank you.
And it's so funny, because like the people I wind up photographing at events like this are the folks I would want to spend like a day with or a half day with and just photograph them and get to know them. So I was like, next time you're in Denver, please drop me a note so we can spend a day together at the studio just creating portraits and, you know, getting to know each other a little bit better. All right, so that's at 132 power for reference for all of you on that backlight right now. I'm gonna take a test shot and just see what that looks like. And so you can see that's a subtle difference to start, right? But you can actually just start to see that gaff tape a little bit more, and I kind of like that. Because what's happening here to my eye is I'm seeing more dimension. I'm seeing more depth. We've lost a little bit of that shadow there, but I can clearly see that these are two different pieces in the scene. I'm probably not gonna turn that up anymore, but I might actually wanna get a little bit more light off of this, right? I might be throwing a little bit too much light on this, and it's just personal preference. So all that I'm gonna do is start to feather that light to the background a little. And we're gonna do this, and obviously as we're doing that, we're throwing more light onto this back layer, and we're throwing less light onto the front layer and that gaff tape, and we're just gonna take another shot. So when I say we work into the process, this is it. And I kind of futz around, and if Gerald was in the studio with me the entire time, I'd be talking to him. I'd say, so tell me, what was your favorite project you did in Paris? Oh, you worked with them too, that's so fantastic. So the entire time, as I'm adjusting all of this, I'm staying in communication with my subject, and we're building more and more rapport. So they're not sitting there going like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. They're sitting there going, oh, wow, he's taking the time to get this right, and he's asking me questions, and he's actively listening, and we have these things in common. So when I pick up my camera again, instead of there being more distance between us, we're closer energetically. And so each successive change is actually bringing us closer, not further apart. And I think that's really important to take note of. So we're just gonna give that one more go. And once again, once we get this light dialed in, then we're gonna play with posing and all that type of stuff as well. And let's just take a peek here. So we can see what happens. Like up in the left-hand corner, you can see how there's more light being thrown onto the backdrop there versus there. And I like that. So to my eye, that's a really, really nice fade right now. The back obviously is a little bit brighter than the front, but Gerald is more heavily exposed than anything else. So his skin is now the brightest part of the image. We have these really lovely layers coming back and through. In post, I might change this to blue. I can even do that in Capture One real quick. So I might shift this purple more to blue to play with what's going on with the underlayer in his outfit a little bit. In an ideal world, I would have done that up front, but we were working with a few different backdrops and just making it work to some extent. But this is a great starting point. To me, this is something that I would feel really good about out of the gate. So we're just gonna work through a couple of poses here, and then we'll just do a reassessment. So are you a person who would ever bring hands up like this into something contemplative, thinking about your paintings?
Sure.
We were talking about some of the paintings that he does earlier, and it's fascinating. And I always ask somebody if it feels right to them, right? Because like I'm an anxious person, if you can't tell. So I'm like this. Like if I'm sitting and I'm hanging on to things, but some people just aren't like that, right? Some people don't go to face. So I'll say, hey, would you ever bring your hand up and think that way? And if they go, no, I'm like, shake that out. We're not gonna do it. If they are, we just sort of play with it and see how that works. Yeah.
Question in the chat.
Please.
If your subject has bright earrings or a bright shirt or something distracting on, how do you keep the attention of the shot on the face?
So in that, if it's something like earrings, I'm just gonna say maybe take those earrings off, unless they're vitally important to the shoot or the person. So if it's like, oh, my grandmother gave me these earrings and it's really special, at that point I might look at more controlled lighting or something like that. For a shirt, I'm never going to put myself in a position where I have to talk about that in the shoot, right? So if you came to me, I would be very clear about the colors that I want. I would be very clear about the patterns that I want. I would say, hey, no white, no saturated pinks, no this and that. So if you have an opportunity to, this is where being communicative in consultations, whether it's creative work or paid work, really, really comes in handy. Same thing, whenever I have an opportunity, whether it's personal work or commissioned work, I ask people to send me the things that they're going to bring. So I'm not trying to sidestep that question. I just find it's a lot easier to deal with that beforehand, so you're not having to deal with that on set. If we are talking about a shirt, of course, what we could do here, let's say he was wearing a white shirt, we could raise this back, or the modifier up a little. We could bring a flag in, we could bring netting in. There's a bunch of different ways we could deal with that on set, but I would just rather not have to accommodate in that way. The other thing is, to me, that's sort of telling someone that what they did is wrong. Right? If I have to ask someone to take their earrings out, or I have to build something around, or tell them to take their clothes off, if you're already uncomfortable in front of the camera, and I'm like, go change into a different outfit. Take those earrings off, they're not working. Like, automatically, there's sort of an energetic shift there. So that just comes down to being very, very communicative up front. But it just depends on the scenario too, whoever asked that question. You know, ideally, you wouldn't be in that position, but then there's modifications you can make relative to what's going on. And that's sort of the gist of it for me. But anything that I could do to not run into problems like that in set, I'd rather head off at the pass than have to deal with. That's great, just like this. And chin's gonna come up just a little. That's perfect. When I'm cueing people, a really important thing is cueing effectively. So it's not even about like, oh, posing with triangles, you know, all of these triangles and all the geometric stuff. If I'm saying, Gerald, bring your eyes up, I'm gonna say, bring your eyes here. If I'm asking someone to tilt their head, I'm gonna say, tilt your head this way as I do it. One of the ways that you can really be discouraging to the people in front of your camera, if you're like, hey, just move your head a little. Hey, can you just do something different with your shoulders? The person is there because you're a professional. You need to professionally guide them through positioning. So be very clear when you're saying it. If I want eyes here, I'm gonna say eyes right here. Bring your eyes up, you're gonna look behind me, you're gonna look through me. So all of it is very clear instruction. And that way, when I go to take the photo, there's no back and forth, because then I don't have to say, Gerald, look at me, but not like that. Oh, that's almost there, but not quite there. Not quite there, not like that. And then you start micromanaging, and then the person's like, they don't know what I'm doing, or maybe my face just doesn't work for photos. And it just gets really weird really quick. So that's perfect, just like that. And chin's gonna come up just a little. And a deep breath in again. And I'm always cueing on breathing, just like that. Perfect. And I'm gonna just play with some different positions here, and we're gonna see what we're looking at. That's great. And I'm gonna kind of let this bleed over into the other background. Chin's gonna come down a little now, just like that. And you see that difference between those two, everyone, the glasses, right? So this shot to this shot. The difference in having the reflection in the glasses versus it not being there was movement in the chin of about an inch or so. So really the details matter so much for these types of shoots. I will say another reason why I like to build out sets like this where it's layered, and oftentimes I won't just have layers of backdrops, but in my studio, or if I had another one of these, I might have another backdrop here coming in at an L. And the reason being is because then I can step into the short side of light, the shadowed side of light, and shoot. So I can shoot from frontal, I can shoot from camera left, I can shoot from camera right. So without changing anything in the scene, that's drastically changing. And I'm gonna shoot 3 different positions really quickly so that you can see how different that light looks. And we'll just stay in the same position. Perfect, that's great, Gerald. And we'll stay there, and your eyes will just stay right here. And so ignoring the ancillary stuff in the background, if we just take a peek at how different all 3 of these look, there is a massive difference in how these images read, right? This one right here is very kind of broad, it's open. I would call it commercial and expected. The one into short side light, people would say that's very cinematic, it's very moody, it's very dramatic. And then the one where I was shooting dead on is somewhere in between. But just by pivoting around 3 or 4 feet relative to my setup, I'm getting a very, very different type of image. Very similarly, if I were to come in, and we'll stay right here like this, Gerald, if I were to shoot over the top versus I were to shoot here, versus shooting low to high, the way that all of these images are going to read is also incredibly different. So if we look at these 3 next to each other, that reads so, so different. So if you combine up, down, and then side to side, just by pivoting around and altering the angle relative to your subject, you're telling a completely different story. One big thing that I really avoid doing is this. And obviously this isn't exactly lighting, but it's shooting over the top of someone. Because now all of you who are here with me looking at this photo, and all of you who are out there watching the stream, you're looking down on Gerald, right? The perspective is you're looking down on him. There is something really, really powerful in a bad way to me about now looking down on this man whom I'm trying to celebrate. So you will almost always see me shooting at eye level or below, because I want to be seeing a person here, or I want to be lifting them up. I never want to be diminishing them. And there's a really big thing that we do, or some people do in the industry, that to me just gets under my skin. And especially if, let's say, you're full figured and you put your head forward and they turn shoulders away and they shoot with a 35 and they do this, and you minimize a person. You minimize their body, you minimize their presence. Don't be the person who does that, right? Every body deserves to be celebrated, so keep a close eye on what you're doing angle-wise. It makes a really massive difference, and especially when someone looks at that photo of themselves, if they're looking at a photo and they're being minimized like that, you're reinforcing a really, really negative pattern there. So we have power, a lot of power as photographers. It's important that we maintain that and know that we can either be lifting people up and celebrating them or diminishing them. And it's really our choice depending on what we're doing and what's happening creatively on our sets. So let's see here. What do we want to play with? Let's do this, Gerald. I'm going to have you take up space. Okay. So like instead of just being kind of compressed here, we can play with hands coming off the edge of the table. We can kind of shift through here. Okay. The reason I like doing this is because I love the metaphor of starting with boxes, because I feel like we all put ourselves in boxes. Family puts us in boxes, partners put us in boxes, society puts us in boxes. And so the metaphor of starting here and then starting to break out of that is really, really strong for me. And it's also getting someone being more comfortable taking up space. So we start here really guarded, and then we start to move out and take up more space. And we start to build some authority in ourselves with that. That's perfect. And then we can even go a little bit wider if you're comfortable. Great. And then chin's gonna come out toward, I know, oh no, my neoprene is slipping. You know, a pro photographer would have clipped this. No, we'll play with it, we'll leave it. Cool, thank you. All right, that's great, Gerald. And then we can kind of just move through the shoulders if that feels all right to you. There it is, oh, a little shimmy shake. That's great, love, 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 love. Perfect, Gerald. And what I'm gonna do now is we're gonna bump up our key just a little bit. And actually, I'm gonna raise this key up a little bit too. So that's the other thing that happened, right? Earlier, Gerald was down here. And I had that light set up to him being down here because we're working with the grid and because we're working with controlled light. When Gerald stands up, the light's now in a different position. So before it was closer to him, but it was also above him. Now if we look at the axis of our light, instead of going in an ideal position, we're actually coming down to mid-chest. So since he stood up a couple of feet, we're just gonna take the time to raise that light up a couple of feet as well to maintain the quality of the light and the dimension that we are creating in his features. That's looking fantastic. Perfect. And then I'm just gonna do this again and kind of flood into position.
The chat's asking, so what about a heavy set type person frame? I guess they're asking, like, how would you approach that?
I mean, so a big part of this comes down to the consultation again, right? Like what's going on with them. Like I really try and convey to the people who I photograph that I want them to be celebrated and seen exactly as they are. You know, so I don't want someone to feel like they have to change. I don't want them to feel like they have to be minimized. So I would pose as someone who is more heavy set or full figured, just like I would pose anybody else. We would lean into those curves, we would lean into those lines, we would lean into those shapes. I think like there's ways of doing it that's intelligent, but that really comes down to how that person wants to be seen. So I'm asked questions like this: how would you pose someone who's more full figured? How would you pose a man versus a woman, for instance? How does that person want to be seen? Right? A man can come to me, or a male identifying person, and be like, I'm very soft and feminine. Okay, we're gonna do feminine posing. I have a lot of women who come to me and they don't want fluffy dresses. They don't want pearls and flowing things. They're like, I wanna put on a suit and I wanna sit here and be a bad B word. I'm gonna censor that for Adorama, right? But I wanna be a bad B. And I'm like, let's do that. I am going to see them that way. So I do not put my definitions onto the people that I photograph. So I would just have a conversation with them, get to the root of it, and then play with the posing and that type of thing from there. Obviously, depending on body proportions, I'm a little bit more aware of what I'm doing focal length-wise. As most of you know, if you're using something like a 35, whatever's closest to the camera is going to be enlarged, right? So if I put my hands forward and you're all photographing me, my hands are gonna be sizably bigger than my body proportionately. So I might consider where I'm photographing or my angles a little bit more carefully in that instance, but I'm certainly not going to say, oh, I'm gonna move to a different set of posing because they have a different body type. That's just not the way that I personally photograph individuals. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is I played with this earlier, is let's go back into that pose again where you kind of came down a little like this, Gerald. And let's just even bring hands down here, there. And so I'm actually gonna move my key light. And the reason I'm gonna do that is because I do this a lot in my sessions. If any of you have ever seen any of the time lapses with me, it's almost kind of like an Oompa Loompa thing. Like it's up, it's down, it's all around. I joke around, it's like capoeira sometimes when I'm doing this because I'm here, I'm there, I'm down, my lights are always moving. And because I'm trying to explore narrative and story through my lighting. So what we're gonna move into here is Seth will rag on me, but short side lighting. So all that means, everyone, is now the side of the face that's closest to me is gonna have shadow on it versus the opposite side. And we're just gonna see how that plays into sort of that mystery that I was trying to convey earlier. So I'm just gonna bring this around carefully, trying not to destroy this curated set because I don't wanna have to buy anything for Seth. As much as I love you, bro. All right.
Just an excuse for me to retire.
There you go. Okay, well, I'll just start breaking things. That's cool. So what I'm doing now is I'm gonna be very mindful of this position. Now, I don't have the modeling lamp on here. In this instance, this is the time when I would turn the modeling lamp on, especially if I had less ambient light in the space. Obviously, we have all of these video lights right now. Yeah, can you turn those off for a second? Oh, okay. Just so we can kind of see what's going on. All right. Okay, so I would want to turn my modeling lamp on here because now I can see what's going on with that light, right? If you don't have a modeling lamp or if you have too much ambient light, you're just guessing. And I don't want to guess. I'd rather be more efficient with my time. So now looking at this, and Seth, can we turn the backlight off for 1 second as well? Now I can actually see what's going on this side, right? So I can start to see the shadow building in. Because of where this light's positioned, even with the grid, I'm still getting a decent amount of wrap. But we're just gonna take a shot here and take a peek at it because right now, to me, given what I wanna shoot, this is looking really good. It's so much easier to just be able to see what's happening in real time using that modeling lamp. So just like we've been doing, I'm gonna take a little test shot here and then I'll make any adjustments as needed. And that was 2 test shots. That's looking really nice, right? So now, this is one of those instances I love the light right now. I really, really love it. The whole exposure is a little bit dark, so now instead of changing anything with my lights, I'm just gonna make a global change to my aperture. So I'm at 6.3 right now. I'm actually just going to open up to 5.6, and I'm gonna take that same frame, and then we'll see what's going on. And that's just about perfect for me. So now I'm gonna keep him in this position. Gerald, you look absolutely incredible. And Gerald, your nose is gonna come to me just a little. And then your eyes are gonna go right to Seth. Perfect. And we're gonna play into this. And these are looking really, really nice. And we'll drop your chin just a hair. And now we'll close your eyes here. Very contemplative. Think about being back in Paris. Think about your paintings. Think about the gentleman we both know in Denver. I just get my meditative NPR voice. I'm like, we're just gonna go ahead and go into that place. Let's just relax. Like
Just
all the tension we're feeling.
Let's paint some happy trees.
Yeah,
just
some happy
tap,
trees.
tap, tap.
We're just gonna put a nice little background light right there. You don't need to if you don't want to. It's fine.
This is some Bob Ross.
John Ross.
Bob Ross.
John Ross.
Oh, please.
Oh, he's a legend. I would never. That's sacrilegious. Bob Ross has my heart. All right, so same thing here. I'm just gonna allow myself to pivot around Gerald now that we have this lighting position in play. What happens if I start to step in and see him move on to that back layer? You know, what's that feeling like? What happens if I move around to the broad side a little bit more? And then you're gonna look right through the camera here, right there. And this is just giving me a chance to see what these different angles look like, and each one of these are reading. So, and I love that frame. So I didn't think I was gonna like it with more direct light, and it turns out that I did, but I'm giving myself a chance to move and try different things. It is so, so important. So let's actually see, Gerald. I wanna build this up a little bit more here. I will say, I tend to shoot for long periods of time with people. So if Gerald came into my studio, we might have a 4-hour session, right? I'm not like a mini session person. It's just not how I work. And as we did that, we might play with different styles. We might deconstruct this. We might take that external vest off. We might add other pieces into here. But what I want to see is if I bring a little bit of a buildup in here, how this works. So I'm just going to slide a little quarter box in.
Are you saying they're asking if you're shooting single light now, or is everything?
No. So everything is still firing, everyone. So everything that we had on from the beginning is still on in here. Let me get this box and I'll take a shot with and without the fill, just for reference. Or I'm just making that up and I'm not paying attention to my light. We'll find out in a second. What's that? Let's see. Yeah, it's all going. Your eyes good? Sorry, dude.
I'm used to it.
That's it. This is how you destroy your tech. All right, so obviously the modeling light, so we can turn the lights back on. You already have the house lights back on. We can turn those back on, So I just want to see if this is built up a little bit more. Like what happens if we kind of come and lean into me here? Okay, this is great. And to me, this changes it drastically too, right? Having a little bit more height here and even having some separation from how flat the table is, it's just an interesting little effect. I'm not saying it's good, I'm not saying it's bad, but I tend to build layers up as well. If I have someone sit, a lot of times I won't have them sit on a stool. I'll have apple boxes at different angles, and we're just bringing some geometry and lines into the frame to make it a little bit more visually interesting. And we're adding a little bit of visual intrigue without taking away from Gerald. So this is just a way to add into something where someone's gonna stop. I don't create for other people. However, I do create with the awareness that all of my business comes from social media. So I don't spend any marketing dollars. It's all off of primarily Instagram. So I have to get people to stop, right? It's really important for me as an artist to get people to stop to look at my work. So I tend to shoot in series, and I'll put something that I know is a little bit weird or different as the first photo so that people will take the time to stop and swipe through. Because all of a sudden they're like, what's going on there? What is this guy doing? Next. And then they're like, oh, that's not bad. Next, okay. And then they spend a minute on there, and then the algorithm goes, this guy is creating valuable content for the system, and then more people see my work. So it's just a thought, like even adding in a little bit of visual intrigue can go a long way, taking something from expected to unexpected in terms of how people are relating to your work or how it's being seen relative to the game that we're all playing with social media, which is just part of our life, for better and for worse. All right, I already know that because I changed his position so much, I don't need to take a test shot here. This light is way too off and it's in the wrong position. I can just eyeball this, and I see that so much of this light is now going behind Gerald because he's leaned forward. He's higher, so before I do anything else, I'm just gonna move that forward a little bit. And if anyone hears that sound right now, that's just my brain whirring, trying to figure out my lighting. Don't worry about that. So I'm just gonna bring this light back in and now take another test shot. And I really, really like how this is looking overall. And now something's not firing. And you know what I did? I upped my aperture. So this lens has the aperture ring here. And so I accidentally have this set to unclick. So I move my aperture without thinking about it. I always double check this type of stuff, and I didn't that time. I also, for some reason, have my ISO set to my wheel. And like, I'll just press my face up against the camera and change ISO all the time. So you would think that I would change these settings, and I don't. I just keep struggling. I'm sure my therapist has something to say about that, but we won't get into that right now. We're just gonna carry this forward and chin just a little bit this way, Gerald. That's great, just like that. Ah, that's so fantastic. That is so, so, so fantastic. I really, really love this. Perfect, Gerald. And then eyes will come through me. This is great. I will say, if I was shooting Gerald in my studio, I always start with someone sitting at a table. Always, some sort of table. And the reason being, it's safe, right? You sit at bars together, you sit at restaurants together. I'm half Sicilian, I grew up around a table. So being around a table is so familiar to me. So it's you put someone there and then you don't have to worry about your legs, and it's just a position that we find ourselves in often. I'm like, hey, I like your look. You know, we just happen to be out somewhere, so it's a safe place. Then we take the table away, and now we're sitting and we're a little bit more exposed, but we're still sitting. And then finally, we take that chair away, and by then someone's like, all right, I got this. The nerves have gone away. They've seen a couple of great photos. They're starting to feel themselves. That's my stepwise process, knowing how we psychologically respond to being photographed. Never lose sight of the fact that it's very vulnerable to be in front of the camera, even for people who are experienced doing it. So I'm always just very mindful of that. So that's just a trick I use. If you're starting with people standing, give yourself a chance to try it a different way and just see how your clients or the individuals in front of your camera respond to that. This is amazing. And going back to it, everyone, too, once again, we only have an hour to work together here, and that's kind of unfortunate. If we had more time, if you were in my studio, if it was just Seth and me playing creative, whatever, something rather, we would be moving these backdrops around more. I might bring that backdrop in to make an L here and then use that to flag part of the light coming down. I might bring this in L over. If I had a smaller backdrop, I might bring it in here. So there would be a lot of experimentation going on. So where I'm going is, as I get to these sets and series, you're seeing me try a lot of things. And I don't believe in failure necessarily as we relate to it, but I have to try those things to get to where I want to be. So someone's like, well, you know, I created a bunch of images I don't like. I'm like, great. You have to create those to get to the images you like, right? I tried a technique and I didn't like it. Great. That's a process of elimination. And now your voice is starting to emerge from knowing not just what works for you, but what doesn't. So it's just the act of creating. I stay in motion. I keep trying new things. And then I'm going to stumble onto something or work through a problem to an endpoint that feels right and that feels visually compelling. And let's go all the way into profile here, Gerald. So you're going to go all the way over that shoulder, and chin's going to come high. That's great, and we're gonna stay there. And I know I wanna see shadows on this side, so I'm gonna have to push that light in, right? If I don't push that light in, let's take a look at what it's looking like. Brilliant. And that's cool, that's a good start. There's nothing wrong with that, but if I start to move that key in deeper here, and I bring that down just a smidge, we're gonna start getting more shadow on this side here. And to me, that's going to be a more intriguing portrait and a more intriguing character study. Now we're getting more contrast out of that. And then if I stay here and I up my aperture just a little, and right now I'm exposing for highlights. So whenever I'm setting the settings on my camera, I'm always looking at highlights first. So in this case, I'm looking at these highlights on Gerald's nose and face. I'm going to expose for those. And then if the shadows are too dark, I'm gonna take care of them separately. So if I get to the point where the highlights look good, I'm gonna anchor that, that's gonna stay where it's at, and then I'm gonna change my fill, and then we'll fill those shadows with our fill light because I don't wanna be changing things globally. So I'm using my aperture to define the highlights. And that's looking really, really nice. I can even play with going up to 7.1 here. Seven one. Change camera. It's not me, it's my camera's fault. It's totally not me. Come on, friend. There we go. You gotta be nice. So you sweet talk the camera, it all starts working. You're having a hard day, I'm having a hard day too. Seth's having a hard day. Amazing. Okay, so we're going to 7.1 now, and we'll look at a little comparison between those two. And so looking at this, I actually like the 6.3 better. So I'm gonna go back to 6.3. And once again, everyone, this is personal preference. If you show me a photo and you're like, Johnny, what do you think of this? What do you think of the lighting? I'm gonna say, what were you trying to say with the lighting, right? Like, what were you trying to convey with the lighting? And you're like, well, you know, I really like this idea. The person I was photographing is going through a tough time and they're stuck in this place of creative rut. And I'm like, wow, that low-key lighting makes a lot of sense, right? If you're like, oh, they're an esthetician and they wanted something that was really light and bubbly that they could put on Pinterest, I'm like, we might need to alter the ratios a little bit there. So even in terms of what you like or don't like or what works or doesn't work, it all has to do with that intention again. So it comes back to what are we trying to say and do and communicate through our lighting.
Kevin's asking, how long is a photo session usually with you?
I mean, so if you came to me, generally speaking, I don't do anything under 2 hours. I like a half day, if at all possible. I really like a half day, and I sort of have become a photographer's photographer, which I love. So I mainly photograph photographers as clients now. They seek me out, and I either go to them or they come to me, and in those cases, I'll book out an entire day. I'll say, hey, let's do it. We're gonna do some more traditional stuff first half of the day. We're gonna go out and get lunch. You know, after that, we'll come back, we'll feel a little bit more free form, and then we'll get more expressive. So I tend to shoot for very long periods of time because I want to feel free to explore all of this. And if someone needs a moment or they wanna try something different, I don't wanna constrict it. I used to do those sessions where I'm like, I'm gonna back them all up. I'm gonna get 6 in a day. I'm gonna do the Costco mentality. And by the end of it, I was energetically exhausted. I was actually making less money, and my clients were kind of like, it was good, but could have been better. So that was a lose, lose, lose for me. I would rather focus on quality over quantity, give someone an experience they can't get anywhere else, and then be able to walk away at the end of the day and said, I did something significant for the person who was in front of my camera. And we are coming up on 8 minutes left here, everyone, which is very unfortunate because I'm having a great time with all of you right now.
You can go over a little bit, but you know.
Oh no,
I'm so much Johnny.
You're only paying me to 6, so I'm out at 6. No, I'm teasing everyone. We could definitely stay.
We got the detox from you.
That's a really great question, and that's something that Seth and I talked about earlier. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn all of these off. So sorry for everyone who's in the stream, I already forgot about doing that. So the question was, how do I make sure that the ambient light is not affecting the exposure? So how do I know that it's not intermingling with the lights that are on the set? We do a test for that. So all that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn all of these lights off, and then we're gonna take a look at what this looks like without anything. Now, part of it is just being familiar with the lights. We purposely went to like right around F6 or F8, somewhere around there. And generally speaking, that's going to negate, but it is a good thing just to double check on that. So let me just take a shot here, and now I have all of those lights off. And that's how we know. So in this case, all of the light, it's a perfectly black frame. If there was any bleed, we would see it here. This becomes even more important. Obviously, I'm working with strobes here. If you're an individual who works with constant lights, that's an even bigger consideration. But it's always nice just to have a frame of reference, and then we can build these lights in one at a time. Even in this case, if I was in the studio by myself right now, what I would do, since I was checking that, is I would just take a second to see what each one of these lights is doing. And chin up just a little, Gerald, right there. And so I'm just gonna use that key light again and build these in. So that's just the key light. And that's pretty compelling on its own, I'm not gonna lie, right? So this goes back to that idea that, hey, you can do a lot with one light. So also I want to impress upon all of you out there that if you only have one light, you can do really incredible things with it. You don't need 2 lights, you don't need 6 lights. You can literally use a Home Depot light bounced off a sheet and create world-class photographs. So it's really nice having this great gear and having multiple lights, but it's not necessary to create a significant portrait. So now I'm gonna turn that fill light back on, and now that I saw it without the fill light, I'm probably gonna turn my fill light down to allow more shadow to come into that scene. So that fill light's coming in now. All right. And actually that looks pretty good. So I don't have the background light on. So now that we've changed into this setup, I actually prefer the way this looks. We're not getting any light onto that backdrop. We're not seeing the depth of the backdrop, but this feels a little bit more classical to me. It's a very almost Caesar-esque pose. The chin is high, he's open, and that would be usually with a window light or something like that. So relative to pose and mood, it makes more sense for me to keep that background light off. That's where it comes back to. This is a constant dance. When I'm changing posing, when I'm changing mood, I'm giving myself a chance to breathe and ask, so thank you for asking that question. And once I assessed it, I'm like, oh, this looks perfect. But then I tried something else. I'm like, wait, that wasn't perfect. This looks perfect now. So it's giving yourself a chance to play and make sure you know what all of your lights are doing as you're making these adjustments throughout. And just for my reference here, I'll bring your chin back to me just a little bit more. And then your eyes are going to come right here to this little signed piece that I signed earlier, because now I've been at Adorama. Thanks, Adorama. Hooray. Okay. And I just want to see what this looks like as chin comes in. And so chin's going to come down just a little. And I'm just looking at the reflection in the glasses, everyone. And I can still see it from the modeling lamp here, so I know I'm going to get it a little bit more. And we're working, and chin's going to come down even a little bit more and a little bit to me. Right there. And we won't move from there, Gerald, please. So that's looking really nice. And even just a cinch more this way with the face. And this is that little back. You're doing great. I'm just working on my light. You look amazing. We're going to keep building you up there. And we're still catching the edge. Before I change anything else here, what I'm gonna do is turn my key up, because I like what this light is doing, but obviously we don't have enough light for my taste coming in from the key. So I'm gonna bump that from 132 to 116. And then you'll come in even a little bit more here, right there. And that's looking pretty compelling. And then you're gonna look right past me. And then I'm gonna play into horizontal, and I'm just gonna kind of move around here and see what's going on. And once again, this is just play. Now, I preferred the lighting earlier, to be completely honest with you. You look great still here, but for personal preference, I preferred that more. And it's really just a give and take for me, everyone. So we're just trying all of these different things. We're seeing what works the best. We're playing with lighting. We're playing with our ratios. We're turning things on. We're turning things off. And we're doing so in a way where we're not constraining ourselves by expectation. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've had to adjust to get to the point where I'm at in my career now, is I used to expect so much. And I'll tell a super quick anecdote, and then we'll open it up to some questions and things like that. But it was years ago, a friend of mine was really dedicated to getting on the cover of Vogue Italia. That was like their whole goal. Like Vogue Italia and I can die, right? That was their bit. And so they got on the cover of Vogue Arabia, and we were losing it. All of us were literally losing it. We're dancing. I was like popping champagne in Denver. I was doing whatever that is. I don't know. I was just really excited. And all of a sudden I call, and he has this monotone voice. And I'm like, hey, he's like, hey. And I'm like, what's going on? And some of you know where this is going. He's like, hey, and I'm like, you got on the cover of Vogue Arabia. He's like, it's not Vogue Italia. It was a failure. Not only was it not a win, it was a failure. That is the vileness of expectation. Because when we have expectation, we lock ourselves into this. We are so hyper fixated on this narrow piece in front of us that we're missing out on everything in the periphery. And it's the same thing with this. If you have a defined expectation of lighting, of ratios, of style, you're gonna walk in and you're gonna be hyper fixated on this one thing, and you're gonna miss out on so much amazing stuff. So it's allowing yourself to be liberated from the tyranny of expectation so that you can be freed by creative expression, and then you see where that takes you. You see where that takes your art. You see where that takes you and your client. And then when you get into that free flow space, we're in here, we're listening to music we both like, you know, there's a little bit of a dance happening, literally and metaphorically. I'm playing with stuff. I'm like, what do you think? No, I like the shadows better. And these really beautiful things emerge when we give ourselves to the moment, and we create space for that person to participate in the creative process as well. The person who's in front of us. So if I can impress anything upon all of you, it would be to explore more. It would be to embrace failure more, and it would be to take some of the pressure off of yourselves. Just play. That's what I really want for all of you, is to be excited to pick up your camera again, to be excited about the lights, and to not go in and be like, I have to create a branding setup because I'm doing new marketing materials, because I'm going to the Chamber of Converse for Dallas, and I need cards that show this. And it's like, that's great. Do that, but then also get in there and just mess things up. Go like, I'm gonna uplight, I'm gonna downlight, I'm gonna overhead light, I'm gonna add a flashlight, I'm gonna add a phone light, take someone into a bathroom, use candles, you know, hang upside down like a possum and shoot them, like do whatever. Get a little bit experimental and just play and find joy in the process, because that joy for your craft, that joy for your art is going to translate into your images. And if it's not there, you can't Photoshop joy into a photo. You can't Photoshop connection into a photo. There's not AI generative emotion yet. It's close. Right? It's probably happening, but we're not quite there yet. So it's just to embrace the process and embrace yourselves as artists more and just see where that takes you in your art. That's what the biggest thing for me is. So
someone's asking, do you show your model the tether of the screen during the shoot?
it depends on the person, right? So a lot of times, and some of you who are like, oh, Jonny might be a pro, are gonna scoff at this. A lot of times I don't tether at all. I know, bad Jonny, bad Jonny. One of the biggest reasons is I'm so manic. You are seeing the most reserved version of me right now, which might be hard to believe, like quite literally. Normally there's like this gremlin dance going on while I'm shooting. I have destroyed the port in the Sony a7R IV 3 times now. Literally 3 times I've had to send it in from kicking it out. I have the most like crazy setup. I have my L bracket pushed into the cable and then a tether stop, and I usually have another one because I'm just all over the place. So I'll trip, I'll fall, I've knocked my MacBook down. So the first thing is fundamentally, I don't want to damage my gear. The other thing is, for a lot of the people that I photograph, everyone thinks I only photograph models, but I photograph a lot of quote unquote everyday people. The difference is they look like what people perceive as models in the photos because they're confident. So if you saw that person on the street going down, you know, whatever, like 42nd, and they're just like, ugh, and then you saw them in the photo, you wouldn't think it was the same person, right? And now I completely lost my train of thought. But where it goes with the tethering, it came back. It puts me in a position, if I have a screen, I have one of two choices if Gerald is here. Now I know Gerald feels confident, right? I have that sense. He's been in front of the camera a lot, but if he hadn't been, if I'm tethering to the screen, I can either have it facing him, in which case he's gonna be deconstructing everything, right? If you've ever been photographed and you can see the photos in real time, you're like, is that what my face looks like? It's kind of like when I hear this video later, I'm gonna be like, Seth, did I really sound like that on set? It's gonna sound like this? Do I sound like lighting?
It's exactly what you sound like.
Thanks, dude, I appreciate you reinforcing that. Anyway, there's that aspect, right? The deconstruction that happens. Now, I can turn that away. I can turn that toward me, but if I turn that toward me, now Gerald's seeing me judging him on the back of a big screen, and I'm just making adjustments there. So I either have to isolate him from the process, or I have to bring him in which case I'm gonna have him connected to a screen instead of to me. So like I do tether, of course, for all of my commercial work. I tether when I'm educating, but more often than not, when I'm in my studio on my own, it's just free form. And then it feels organic and right, and I can come over and be like, Gerald, look at this. He's like, that's me. I'm like, not only is that you, but that's you in the back of my camera. There's something more powerful about seeing the frame on the back of a camera than on a screen, because someone associates the screen with software and with programs and with Photoshop. I'm like, that's you in this moment. It's undeniable proof of how beautiful you are, how magical you are, how powerful you are, how radiant you are, whatever it might be. So that's my personal preference for this type of stuff. Of course, if I'm working with an art director, I have it there so they can be like, the greens aren't quite green enough. And I'm like, all right, we'll make them more green for you, Julian, or whatever. I don't know, I've known a lot of art directors named Julian. It's just a thing.
And they're always under 26, and they lose their job a week later anyway. So it's like, I don't understand.
We were just talking about being jaded. Both of us are jaded. It's fine. So the question was, how much post-processing would I do before actually delivering these? And I would say probably not a lot. So if I go back to one of these photos, I can quickly work through something. Like we had this conversation earlier, I really try and keep things as solid in camera as I can possibly get. So like what I'll do a lot of times, I'll lower contrast, I'll play with the tones, I'll play with the color temp a little. Now that the AI retouching tools are in Capture One, it makes my life a lot easier. So I'm rarely leaving Capture One anymore. Before, I might go into Photoshop and do a little bit of dodge and burn, a little bit of skin cleanup and things like that. But the Capture One tools approximate my process so closely that I can go in there, play with the sliders a little bit, keep it looking natural, do some cleanup, play with the highlights. Then obviously I'm just copying and pasting that to a gallery. And so I could have these done, let's say a set of 10 for Gerald in 30 minutes, and they're deliverable. And then of course, if he has any additional retouching requests, he's like, hey, you know, can you just add a little speck here into my beard, or that was out of, your beard looks perfect. But like if there was anything going on with that, you know, I could address that in tow. But especially for doing things like client reveals now and stuff like that, even in the AI retouching tools in Capture One, if those of you who aren't familiar with it, you can use that when tethering too. So you can actually make AI adjustments. Let's say your client's like, hey, and this happened to me earlier because I'm wearing hats all the time. I had this giant pimple on my head that was like the size of a baby's hand, you know? And I'm just like, I would want to do something with that. So if Seth was photographing me, he could just set that to remove the blemish, and then every photo that I see on the back of that screen, if I'm seeing them in real time, I'm not having to look at that pimple on my face. So whatever it might be, but I try and stay as hands-off as possible with that. And I sort of operate on this bit about authenticity. Seth and I had a chat about something being more documentarian in nature. Obviously, it's smoke and mirrors with the lighting, the styling, the posing, the focal lengths, the aperture, all of that. But beyond that, I want to try and represent Gerald as accurately as possible. And when someone sees that photo, I want them to go like, oh, that's Gerald, not like, oh, that's a more posh, more professional, more polished person who kind of looks like Gerald. He's already enough of those things. But just so I'm not allowing people to go out there and catfish and stuff like that, I don't want to contribute to common catfish syndrome. So we're going to keep things a little bit more real and a little bit less plastic, more than less. So, yeah. And does anyone else in the chat have any questions, or do any of you have any questions or thoughts or anything else? I either did a really good job or a really bad job. Either way, I'm comfortable with it. But no, like, this has been fantastic, everyone. So going back to it, there's so much more that we could go into this. There were infinite variations that we could do with this setup. We could have even changed this. You know, we could have brought a background light in. We could have used that beauty dish that's in the back as a key. That would have been a harder light source, you know, more specular light source. But it's really just about play. Take the tools that you currently have. See what you can do with them. You know, even with modifiers, it's like take the grid off, take the inner baffle off, take the outer baffle off, take all the baffles off and just shoot without any diffusion at all. Give yourself a chance to see what light does in different scenarios. Seth and I had that talk earlier, and I'm like, the one thing for me that's like creative freedom is I know no matter what gear I have, put me in any space with any light, with any camera, with any lens, with any person, I'm going to create a great portrait. Now, I might not be able to create that portrait to spec, right? Because if you're like, well, create a 3-point lighting setup, I'm like, I only have one light. I can't do that. But I know I can create a beautiful portrait in any set and scene, and that's because I know how to see light, I know how to shape light, and I know how to work with my subject and my camera and my gear relative to that. So, please. I do, yeah. So I work with continuous lighting a lot as well, especially when I'm teaching. You know, so it's a little bit easier sometimes to see some of those fundamental principles. There's a time and a place for each one of these tools. So if I wanted to capture motion, or if I was working with the designer and I needed to be shooting at f11 to show all of the tooth in the fabric, I'm going to reach for my strobes right away, right? Because you're not going to want to put the power out in a continuous to shoot at something like f11 and ISO 100. His beard would have melted off. That wouldn't be good for anyone. So that's not an ideal scenario. So it just depends on the client. You know, it depends on the situation and that type of thing. I've been doing a lot more location work outdoors recently and everywhere else, and I'm always reaching for my strobes for that. And it also depends on someone's comfort. Sometimes it is easier to work with continuous if someone's not comfortable in front of the camera because you don't have that flash effect sort of happening. But it's a case-by-case basis. And we have to remember that ultimately light is light. So even if these were all continuous lights, we would have set up the same things. If we would have metered it, our ratios would be the exact same. We would just work into that process a little bit differently. But over, you know, beyond anything else, same modifier, same position, same light, same shadow. Yeah. Nah, I don't.
Last question. How do you work with an insecure person?
No, I was going to say trepidatiously. No, I was just joking. So, I mean, I think in that way, like, I just meet them where they're at. I think that's one of the biggest things, right? If someone comes in and they're like, hey, you know what? I hate being photographed. I would be like, you know, for a long time, so did I. I'm looking for some sort of bridge there, or so do a lot of the people who come in. Like, I don't want to diminish the person and what they're experiencing, but I want them to know they're not alone in that feeling, because most of us feel that way. So it's like, I'm not going to try and fix it, and I would just say, hey, you're uncomfortable right now. Let's take a few frames. After those frames, if you need to take a break or breath, we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm not going to try and fix the problem. I'm not going to try and be a therapist to the person. I'm just going to say, hey, yeah, I get that. It is. Being in here, being in the studio, being in front of people, like, it's nerve-wracking. But I really believe that if you give this a chance and if you trust me, we're going to get to the point where you're less nervous, you're more excited, and I know that we're going to create some really incredible images of you. And we'll get there, but just be with me through this process, and I'll hold my hand with you through that. So it's just allowing someone to feel comfortable and to feel seen in that. And especially if someone vocalizes that to me, we're already in a good place, right? Because if someone just simply says out loud, I don't know if any of you suffer with anxiety. I feel like all of us do in today's world. But like, sometimes it's just so nice to be like, I'm anxious. Like, if I say that out loud, literally, if I'm talking to a friend and I'm like, hey, you know, this is about to start, I'm anxious, and I feel fine. It's simply vocalizing that. So if someone shares that with me, I know they're already getting to a good place. But yeah, it's just meeting people where they're at. And we're all human. We all struggle. We all deal with good and bad days, good and bad times. We all have body image issues. We all think of ourselves in ways other people don't. We all look at our work in ways that no one else does. If Seth and I took the exact same photo of Gerald today, you know, and I'm looking at Seth's photo, I'd be like, wow, dude, that's really good. I'm like, despite all of our differences, you know, I'm not from Brooklyn, but like, still, I can appreciate your work.
What differences? What do you want? What are you trying to start here?
What I'm trying to say is that if I looked at that, and I looked at but I took the same photo, right? I would look at it and go, oh, I don't know. Maybe I should have shot that at 2.8 instead of 5.6. Maybe I could have added a hair light. I would be deconstructing every pixel of it. But for Seth, I could just appreciate it for what it was. So I think it's just understanding that ultimately we're all on the same journey. And, you know, sometimes someone just needs someone to be there to hear it. And then just say, hey, let's just see where this goes.
If you're not looking at your own work critically, you're not growing.
This is also
Period.
true. Absolutely. And that's a fine line, right? So you have to look at it critically enough where you can identify areas where you can build up, but not so much where you're just like, my work is terrible, I'm terrible, I need to sell off my gear so that I can go to Costa Rica and live with sloths, although that is pretty cool.
I'm down.
I know, actually, I'm like, actually, everyone, this is it. This is the last time Johnny's going to teach. You can find me on the beach with the beard, hanging out with sloths. That's
gonna rent
brilliant.
out jet skis to rich people and
Yeah,
hunt sloths all day.
exactly.
I'm down. Let's do this.
No, I mean, this has been great. So thank you all so much for those of you who came here to learn from me today. Thank you, Gerald, so much for being here. Seth, thank you for holding down the fort on the tech and dealing with my BS. Adorama, Printique, Flashpoint, thank you so much for giving me the tools and the space. All of you who decided to join the stream, you could have been doom scrolling on TikTok, but instead you're here with us, so thank you for doing that. Anytime I have an opportunity to do this, it's still surreal for me. It really is. It's such a beautiful thing to know that I'm creating work that resonates with people and that you would want to know what my process was. Like, it's really wild. This past weekend, I taught with Lindsay Adler at her studio in Jersey City, and it was this watershed moment for me. Right? I've been working toward this for the past decade of my life, obsessively, sacrificially. I've given up so much. I've grinded harder than anyone else that I know. And so to see the fruition of that and to have all of you just wanting to spend an afternoon in the city when it's hot AF out there, you know, especially for those of you who took the subway and you sweated to be here with me, to spend a little bit of time for me and deal with my craziness, I seriously cannot express how much it means to me. And I love you all so much and I appreciate you all so much. And I want you to show yourself some love. So if you could do me one favor, person to person, human to human, artist to artist, love on yourself a little, create some art for you, allow yourself to explore and realize how incredible that you are so that you can then pass that along to another person and give them the torch so that they can realize how incredible they are. And that's the power that we have as photographers. And I think it's really important that we own that because we get to embody the change that we want to see in the world and we get to heal and elevate and lift up and celebrate people. And that's an honorific that I hold very dear. And it's a sacred thing to me. And I hope it is to you too. So love y'all. Thank you so much for being here. See you again. Ciao.